Every narcissist would be scared to learn what Carl Jung found. An angry empath is more dangerous than they thought. Not because they become mean, but because they can't be broken. During his many years of clinical study, Jung wrote about a psychological phenomenon that was so deep that it made us question everything we thought we knew about how power works. He saw empaths, those kind, caring people who take on everyone's pain, reach a breaking point that makes them much stronger than the people who hurt them. Jung called this the alchemical moment, the point at which years of poisoning turn into pure mental gold all of a sudden. The empath stops letting other people's evil fill them and turns into a force of light that can't be dimmed by manipulation. What shocked you the most? Jung understood that narcissists fear this change more than anything else. Since an angry empath doesn't fight back with the same tools, they go beyond the whole area. Come with me as we delve into Jung's deepest ideas about what happens when the kindest people say enough and why that moment changes everything. Because Jung found something that modern psychology still won't admit. An empath's kindness was never a sign of weakness. It was strength hiding behind a mask, ready to show itself at the right time. Jung wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." For empaths, though, accepting that they have a skill they've been taught to be afraid of is even scarier. I call this the shadow integration of the wounded healer. From Jung's point of view on archetypes, this is like this. The wounded healer is an archetype of someone who learns from pain. But Jung noticed something very interesting. This pattern doesn't break when it hits its breaking point. It changes into what I call the sovereign healer, someone who heals from a place of power instead of weakness. There is no softness to this change. No, it's not a slow waking with meditation and soft music. Jung called it enantiroia, which means that everything changes into its reverse over time. The giver who never stops becomes the conscious chooser. The strategic reflector is made from the continuous absorber. Modern biology backs up what Jung already knew. Empaths have different wiring in their brains. Dr. Judith Olaf's study shows that people who are empathic have mirror neurons that are overactive and areas of the brain that are active when processing emotions. But Jung knew, and science is only now starting to agree with him, that the same wiring that makes empaths weak can also make them very strong if they learn to control it. That's not the most dangerous part, though. The most dangerous part is when an empath finally faces what Jung called the shadow. This is their anger, limits, and self-protection that they've been taught to hide. Jung noticed that empaths don't just hide their own bad feelings. They also hold on to other people's shadows, like the anger their parents couldn't show, the grief their friends couldn't handle, and the manipulation their partners couldn't see. I call someone who is empathic a walking trauma repository. But Jung found something amazing. When empaths hit their breaking point, they don't just let go of their shadow, they turn it into something useful. They turn poison that you've been taking in for years into what Jung called psychological gold. Jung called this the ultimate function, which means being able to change opposing forces into something new. This change really happens in this way, and this is why Jung's ideas are so scary for narcissists. The first step is to recognize the empath suddenly sees the pattern. All the times they took the blame for someone else's actions, said sorry for other people's mistakes, and thought that love meant always giving while only getting crumbs in return. Jung called this lifting the veil, which means that patterns that were unconscious become aware. Stage 2, putting it all together. They don't reject their sensitivity. Instead, they use it as a tool. They don't use their super awareness to take in and be pleased. Instead, they use it to spot trickery before it starts. Jung saw that fully developed empaths can read people's unconscious impulses with surgical accuracy. They are like psychological seers. The third stage is the sovereignty. The empath stops looking for approval from other people and becomes what Jung called individuated, which means mentally complete and in charge of their own life. Through conscious shadow work, they've finished themselves, so they don't need anyone else to finish them. In this way, what I call the empathic paradox comes about. The more an empath absorbs their shadow, the more caring they become. But this kindness isn't naive anymore. It's fierce, smart, and scary to people who use their problems to gain power. If someone has ever told you that you're too sensitive but you thought that sensitivity was a strength, say, "My sensitivity is my superpower." Now you're learning about what Jung called the dark side of empathy. This isn't taking on other people's pain, but using your empathic skills to protect yourself and make decisions. When an empath wakes up, they don't become less sensitive. It turns into surgery. As the narcissist performs, They can feel their emotional state underneath. They can also spot manipulation before it happens fully, and they can tell lies through tiny changes in energy and facial expressions that other people miss. Jung called this level of awareness active imagination, which means being able to see psychological realities that are working below the surface. When an empath awakens, they become what I call a truth detector. No amount of charm or manipulation can fool them. Cases from real life. Let me use 3 situations to show how this change works. The hunter at work. Sarah had a coworker who was very good at taking credit and putting the blame on someone else. She believed his lies and questioned her views for years as she took in his projections. She saw the trend, though, when she did Jung's shadow work. She stopped defending herself, her work, or trying to show that she was smart to someone whose opinion didn't matter. There was a change right away. Sarah's sensitive work stopped giving her coworker something to feed on, and her mask started to fall off. People started to notice how he was acting because Sarah wasn't taking in the stress he was making. She was mentally tough enough to handle his tricks no longer. The person who tricks families. Michael's mother used guilt, shame, and mental blackmail to keep him in line. When he set limits, she'd threaten to kill herself, play the victim when he was right, and talk about her pain all the time. But Michael stopped being a part of the story when he used Jung's ideas about individuation. He felt sorry for his mother's pain, but didn't take blame. He set limits without giving a reason. His mother's tricks got worse until they were no longer effective. Because he wasn't involved, she had to find better ways to meet her needs, or she had to find new people to hurt. Michael stopped being able to be manipulated. The lovelorn vampire. Lisa was always walking on eggshells in her previous relationship, taking care of her partner's feelings and making sure they were happy. She thought that love meant giving up everything, and she thought that her partner's feedback was making her better. When Lisa learned about Jung's work on projection, she understood that her partner was putting their own hate for themselves on her. Every complaint was really about how they denied something. Lisa gave up defending herself, explaining herself, and trying to get someone to love her when they couldn't. The relationship didn't last long. There was nothing left for her partner to hold on to without her unconscious help. How powerful conscious change is. The empath didn't turn mean or angry in any of these situations. They just became aware. To add to that, Jung knew that awareness is the biggest threat to unconscious control. But here's where Jung's understanding really changes things. The empath who is fed up doesn't just leave the selfish relationship. They turn it into knowledge that makes them impossible to manipulate in the future. Jung called this the coming together of opposites. As an empath grows, they learn to balance kindness and judgment, openness and limits, love and self-defense. They become what I call an integrated warrior healer, someone who can love deeply and protect themselves fully at the same time. Jung called this state the transcendent function, in which opposites come together to make something bigger than the sum of its parts. Their weakness turns into strength, and their strength turns into knowledge as they grow up. In his work, Jung saw this happen many times. What he said: one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. For empaths, this means more than just seeing their own shadow. It also means realizing how they've been hurting others without realizing it. The awakened empath knows they weren't picked at random. They were picked because the ego lacks certain traits: real feeling, real connection, and real empathy. Instead of giving these gifts away without realizing it, they learn to share them with people who can return the favor. It leads to what I call the empathic revolution. Empaths don't look for broken people who need to be fixed. Instead, they look for whole, aware people who want to grow with them. If you've learned that your empathy isn't a weakness but a strength that can be used in the right way, say, I choose who gets my energy. Based on Jung's ideas, this is the framework for empowered empaths. Notice the pattern. Jung stressed how important it was to become aware of unconscious habits. The empath needs to realize how they've been putting themselves down. This is not about being self-lambda. It's about giving people power. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Start writing down what you say to people. When do you feel tired? Who always takes more than they give? What stories do you tell yourself to keep yourself in situations that are draining? Jung called this a psychological, not a moral study of conscience. Bring the shadow in. Jung thought that integrating the darkness was necessary for being whole. This means that empaths have to take back traits they were taught to hide, like anger, greed, and the freedom to say no without feeling bad about it. Shadow is not bad. It's life that hasn't been lived. Your anger could be a healthy response to wrongdoing. Your ego could be a sign that you need to take better care of yourself. Setting limits for yourself could be a sign of understanding that looks like coldness. Get used to showing these shadow sides in small, safe ways. Say no without giving too many reasons. Feel angry without trying to see things from the other person's point of view right away. Don't feel bad about putting yourself first. Stop the loss of power. Jung knew that psychological energy is limited and valuable. Empaths need to learn psychological economy, which means being aware of how to use their mental resources. Find places where energy is being wasted and carefully plug them. Don't keep telling people what you mean when they don't want to know. Stop trying to persuade people who are sure they don't understand. Don't pay attention to those who use it as a tool. Do energy audits on a regular basis to see who and what gives you energy and what drains it. Get started with real power. Individualization, or becoming who you really are, was Jung's main goal. For empaths, this means being a part of the whole human experience, not just the parts that other people find easy. Real power isn't being in charge, it's having control over your own life. Pick your answers carefully. Love without giving up who you are. Give without running out. This form of embodiment makes you psychologically independent, rooted in your own truth rather than reactive patterns. When you awaken using Jung's ideas, you don't just change your own life, you also help the evolution of collective consciousness. Your change sends out permission waves that help other people wake up. But Jung worried about ego inflation, which is the risk of being cocky about your progress. Being humble means remembering your own path from unconsciousness to awareness and having compassion for others who are still on that path. You become what Jung called a wounded healer, which means that you have healed your own wounds and can now help others without losing yourself. Because of this, aware empathic communities form, made up of people who have done the work on themselves and can love each other without drama or manipulation. These communities show how to have good relationships with other people, ones that are based on mutual respect instead of unconscious need. Jung imagined a future in which enough people become psychologically whole to have a positive effect on the collective psyche. Part of this vision is the awakened empath, who heals themselves and changes patterns of group relationships that haven't worked for generations. Why they are dangerous, the most important truth. Jung knew this about what makes fed-up empaths really dangerous. What they refuse to do is what gives them the most power, not what they can do to other people. They don't want to take on what isn't theirs, deal with other people's feelings, put their own needs aside, try to explain themselves to people who don't want to understand, or take part in unstable drama. This refusal is stronger than any attack because it comes from a place of not being violent in the mind. The awakened empath just stops being a part of the situation. The whole system of manipulation falls apart without their unconscious help. Jung saw that this withdrawal is often what sets off the narcissist shadow projection crisis. Narcissists have spent their whole life avoiding their own emotional truth, so when they don't have an empath to carry their feelings, they have to face them. This is unbearable for them. They might step up their efforts, get more bold, or desperately look for new sources of supply. But the aroused empath doesn't change. They have learned what Jung called psychological immunity, which means being able to watch other people go through storms without getting caught up in them. This resistance isn't coldness, it's truth. They can feel sorry for the narcissist's pain without giving them permission to do bad things. Narcissists can't understand or control this complex reaction because the person can love the person even though they don't like the dysfunction. The 3 stages of growing empathetic. Jung found that empathic growth happens in 3 stages, which show how vulnerable someone is. Level 1. The empath who is unconscious, has all the feelings but doesn't understand anything, unconsciously takes on other people's feelings, thinks that love means always giving and that limits are selfish, brings in energy thieves. They're like a sponge, control comes from the outside. Goal, set psychological limits so that you can connect with other people without losing who you are. Level 2. The empath who has awakened, acknowledges their ability to empathize, starts to understand Jung's ideas about limits, shadow work, and projection, sees trends in relationships and takes responsibility for them, starts conscious empathy, which means picking when and how to show care, discovers the difference between their own feelings and those of others. Third level, the supreme empath, has shadow work and individuation together. feels deeply without being too much, loves deeply but stays true to who they are, has control over their own mind, responds instead of reacting, senses how other people are feeling without having to deal with it themselves, supports others without giving up anything. To get on this path, you need to be brave enough to look at yourself honestly and take responsibility for what you've done, not what you've done wrong. The best way to show empathic awakening. Jung stressed that strong awareness should be used in a good way. Being able to love without enabling, help without saving, and see clearly without harsh judgment is the highest level of empathic awareness. Some people want to use their gifts at first to hurt people who have hurt them. They want to get even or be found out. That being said, Jung knew that this keeps you stuck in the situation you're trying to leave. Real empathic sovereignty means rising above and using your knowledge to build healthy relationships instead of destroying unhealthy ones. It's about being vulnerable to manipulation while still being safe for real relationship. The best thing about being a fed-up empath is what you make for yourself is what gives you the most power, not what you do to other people. Honest relationship, free will choices, peace for real. Remember what Jung found. The danger is not in being mean or angry. The real danger is when you become aware, independent, and unable to be manipulated. Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Empaths need to accept both their weakness and their strengths, their kindness and their ability to discern. They also need to accept their ability to love and their right to be loved honestly in return. When an empath finally says enough, they don't stop being able to feel deeply. They learn to be able to feel correctly. They don't close their hearts, but they learn to only let people in who have earned it through being aware and real. Jung saw that conscious resistance isn't the biggest threat to unconscious systems. Conscious withdrawal is. When empaths stop taking part in dynamics that don't work, those dynamics can't keep going. Being sensitive was never a weakness. It was your early warning system that let you know when people and places are harmful. Your deep feeling was never too much. It was the whole range of human emotions that other people had learned to dull. Your need for a real connection was never naive. It was your soul calling you to bonds that could hold you deeply. The narcissist was afraid that you would wake up because they knew that once you did, they would never be able to trick you again. You could never be underestimated once you knew how much you were worth. If you knew how much you were worth, no one could get you to settle for less. Jung saw people who had brought together all of their parts, their light and shadow, their power and weakness, their love and their limits. The awakened empath shows this unity by being completely honest, not by being aggressive. This honesty is revolutionary because it doesn't join the unconscious deals that keep broken systems running. I will no longer take in what isn't mine. It says, I will no longer handle other people's feelings. I will no longer lie to make other people feel better. Say something like, I am sovereign in my empathy. If you're ready to stop being dangerous to yourself and start being dangerous to manipulation, your journey from unconscious victim to aware sovereign isn't just changing you, it's also helping everyone heal. It gets easier for other empaths to awaken for everyone who does. Send this to someone who needs to remember how powerful their empathy is. Also, if you want to learn more about Jung's ideas about protecting empaths, watch my video Final Warning to Empaths, They're Feeding on Your Light. In it, I talk about Jung's scariest finding about energy vampirism. Sign up, because we're only just getting started with empathy sovereignty. Don't forget that you're not too much, too emotional, or too deep. The world needs you to wake up, because you are so awake. Thanks for seeing it. We'll see you in the next world.